What is your take on the fact that after 6 years now of this rule of 3.5 times, where house prices have skyrocketed anyway, even when we had limits on it, what do you make of increasing the income to mortgage ratio?
Yeah, I think it's a mad decision, to be honest. I think that if you look at the evidence and the research, the central bank governor himself said this will lead to an increase in house prices. So if he said it, why are they doing it? If they're supposed to be protecting, our economic system, this is about ultimately, developers have been lobbying very heavily for an increase in mortgage rules so that people can pay a higher price for what they're building. This is ultimately about, if you think of it, basic economics, we don't have any major increase in supply of housing. So now there's more money chasing that same supply. What's it going to do? It's going to increase prices further. This is what it's going to do. And if you think about it, it just seems to me that, as I said yesterday on Twitter, the game is rigged. It's for the banks. They said it's for the financial system. It's for the developers. This is about house prices were starting to ease. They could potentially fall. And now suddenly the central bank says, oh, we're actually going to increase the amount of money people can borrow. What's going to keep house prices propped up? 1 in 10 of all houses last year, 1 in 10 were bought by what's called a non-household, which is either a fund or the state itself is buying because they're not building social housing. And the other thing is the question of supply. Where is the supply, not just any supply, because what's the point in the supply of thousands of unaffordable rental properties? Where is the supply of affordable housing coming from? That is the question. And the private developers are saying next year they're going to stop building because they don't see it in terms of certainty, economic certainty. They've said this. So we're going to see supply falling next year. So this comes back to government. In terms of affordable housing, the figures on government are shocking. They're talking about building between 1,300 to 2,000 affordable units per year. That is a drop in the ocean.
Because I think, the government thought they built 20,000 houses this year.
No, the government didn't.
No,
overall,
but 20,000.
Around 20,000.
But back in the boom days, we're talking 50, 60,
there was
70,
80,000 at the height.
So 80,000. So what's changed? How can we build 80,000 back then, but all of a sudden we're celebrating doing 20,000 now?
Because the private construction industry essentially completely collapsed after the crash. 70,000 construction workers emigrated. They are back to a certain extent, but they're not back anything like they were. And also, that whole kind of pyramid scheme of the Celtic Tiger was actually built. The last 3 years of the Celtic Tiger, half of new homes were bought by the buy-to-let landlords. They weren't people buying a home. It was that same thing of investor funds, which comes back to the state has to build. We need a state construction company.
There's a lot of problems in construction that are causing kind of delays. So if you look at during the Celtic Tiger, for every person working in housing or in construction, for every house output, there was 2 to 3 workers. That was the ratio. So if you had 150,000 workers, you could build 50,000 houses. That ratio is broken. It's now more like 7 to 8 workers for every unit of housing output. So there's what's causing that is another whole issue. But to stick to what we're looking at today is houses affordable, not affordable. I can't solve that. I don't have all the answers. What I would say, though, is in the past, banks were able to do these loans, but they could only do a certain amount, say, of 4 times income. And that meant that all the lending was going to people who were a medical doctor rather than someone who was a plumber for the drain doctor. Because banks, credit, they discriminate. They go on whoever's the best bet. This is actually a broadening of the fairness of the system. So I wouldn't look at someone achieving home ownership. Because the people who are wringing their hands about this, most of the time they're thinking, oh, the country, house prices, blah. Most of them have a house. Yeah. Put yourself in the shoes of someone who's stuck paying rent of $2,000 when you could have a mortgage for $1,300 that you can afford, that you can afford, but they won't let you have it. Yeah. And no one looks at the idea of reckless renting, where you're out there blowing your whole income on rent. But we say we suddenly get all prudent when it comes to reckless mortgages. Yeah. We have to have a serious conversation about this. If someone can afford a home and this helps them do that, I don't see how that's a bad thing.